G'day, I'm Rob.
And I'm Dave.
And you're here with us, dear listener, for the final of the 3 Doctor Who 60th anniversary specials, The Giggle. This is our hot take on it. Dave, hello.
Hello, Rob. How are you?
I'm well. And I wanted to kick off this week, Dave, by opening with something I'd already said out there on X and on Facebook, which is to point out how thrilling doing hot takes can be. You know, I'm sitting here with no idea what you thought about this episode. I have no idea what the rest of the world thought about that episode. I've not gone out there and looked for opinions on it. And I sit here thinking, am I about to say something obvious? Or will I say something that the rest of the world completely disagrees with and says, are you nuts? I don't know what it will be, Dave. I find it thrilling. How about you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We're going in without any fan preconceptions or conceptions, any received fan wisdom,
Nope.
without knowing what was. We're just going to say what we think. And the great thing about moving back to the Sunday morning slot in Australia is that you can just get up on Sunday morning and watch the episode rather than when it went out on a Sunday night in the UK, and therefore you'd have to sort of go through all of Monday at work, and you'd have to try and avoid social media, which you can't really do, and it all sort of became a big thing. Whereas Sunday morning, you get up, you watch it clean, you write your notes, and then you record, and then you go and see what everybody else thought. I've got to tell you, I have notes this week, Rob. I have several options for most of our sports desk categories, and I'm going to decide that over the course of our conversation. This is exciting. It's the last of the 3 specials plus one.
It is. Yes, there is one to come, but for the 360th anniversary specials, this is it.
Yeah, I'm not quite... Yeah, it'll be interesting when we get to the 4th special, or the 3rd plus 1 special, whether they're that distinct. But these are sort of big picture things that we can talk about next week in our mini-season summary episode.
That's right. But Dave, in all those notes, do you have a word of the week?
I do have a word of the week, Rob. It is trilogic.
Trilogic. My word of the week is flat.
That could mean a lot of things. All right, I've written it down. We will talk about it later.
That's what we try to do with word of the week. Do you have any opening remarks, or should we just go straight to the spoiler curtain?
I will just say very briefly, I again enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed many bits of the episode. It had its imperfections. It was maybe a little bit flabby. There were maybe a few things I didn't think quite worked, but there were some things that worked very, very well. And yes, I was enjoying the episode. Look, I was laughing when I was meant to. I was feeling a bit tense when I was meant to. I was feeling a bit emotional when I was meant to. All the beats were good. It was a good episode. It was a good experience. I have got a number of constructive criticisms as well.
All I'll say then is it sounds like we may be in similar territory.
Excellent. Well, look, there's a lot of spoilery stuff here, so spoiler curtain down.
Spoiler curtains down. And I'll kick us off, Dave, because this is something I've been thinking about talking about all week, and it's Wilf, because after the last hot take we did, a listener commented to us on Facebook that, you didn't mention Wilf was at the end of the episode. And as I said to them, look, there's only so much we can say in 30 minutes. I'm sure we'll have much more to say in this episode. But between that interaction and today, there was an RTD clip that came out explaining Bernard Cribbin's only scene was what we saw at the end of the last episode, and he literally wasn't going to be in this. It's why they had the dedicated to Bernard Cribbins at the end of the last episode, and so on and so forth. So all those spy photos we saw where Tennant was pushing Cribbins around, I thought these were scenes. Apparently not. He was probably just pushing him around on the set. I thought much more had been filmed. It hadn't. And they do paper over it well in this episode with a body double, and they just get him out of the way. But yeah, that was the last we saw of Wilf last episode. I'm glad we have it, but how bloody sad that he was around, Dave. He attended all these read-throughs. There was more to come from the character, but when the rubber hit the road, he only did that one episode.
Yeah, I didn't realise that either until I listened to a few other hot take podcasts where people had been a bit more clued into this and had been sort of following the production notes a lot more than perhaps we have. And they said that, yes, he was scripted to do more in the third, but he just physically wasn't up to it. And so they just said, no, look, let's just do the one scene, have it really nice, have it really special, and then, call it quits. And so, that was the case. And look, there are always things that we don't get to comment on in a hot take. And, we have very strict rules about how long they should go for. We have a very, very strict rule that we've imposed since day one, that no review should ever be longer than the thing it's reviewing.
Correct.
But we do like to make these nice little things. And look, again, to plug next week, we will be sort of pulling out some of those things we missed in our season wrap-up. And in many cases prompted, I think, by the listener feedback we've had about things we've missed as well.
Definitely. So again, if you are out there, comment on Twitter, on Facebook, email us, whatever, and get your comments in on this episode or all three of the specials.
Absolutely. Especially if there's something that you think we should have talked about but didn't.
Indeed. Now, Dave, where do we go from here? I'm keen to talk about the Toy Maker, but I'll throw to you. Do you have something else rather than the Toy Maker?
No, I think the Toy Maker is a very good place to start. It didn't really strike me until he was actually on screen, but Neil Patrick Harris has been in Doctor Who now.
Yes.
You know, TV's Doogie Howser. And the guy from Starship Troopers and How I Met Your Mother from the first few good seasons. And he was also in the bad seasons at the end, but he was in the good seasons. Many, many other great things. I'm genuinely... It's a Sin. He was great in It's a Sin. And obviously that's where RTD met him, I would say. Look, a very, very talented actor, performer, great guy by all accounts. He's hosted the Tonys. Like, this is a big deal. And he's somebody that I really like as an actor, somebody I really quite admire as a person. It's kind of amazing he was in Doctor Who, and it's so clear that this part was written for him. They said, right, what can Neil Patrick Harris do? He can sing and dance, we'll put that in. He can do magic, we'll put that in. He can do card tricks, we'll put that in. He can juggle, we'll put that in. He can do funny voices, they've just said, right, this is an incredibly talented, versatile actor. Let's just make full use of him. And so I think I will say at the very top, Neil Patrick Harris as the Toy Maker was fantastic.
It's interesting that you've gone down talking about the actor so much there, whereas I want to talk more about the character. Yeah,
well, that's next on my list.
Oh, okay. Well, that's where I'm going with my notes. I think it was a very interesting performance. Yes, on the surface, Neil Patrick Harris was very sinister. The character has turned the world upside down, and we've got social commentary on, people always thinking they're right, even a mention of cancel culture, all that sort of stuff. That's all in there, all good. But did you feel, Dave, that there wasn't much more to the character? It was like a veneer. We get told he's this old enemy. We get some colorized clips. That was quite exciting for about 2 or 3 seconds. But it didn't feel any deeper than that to me. Look, we're rolling on an old enemy and we're going to roll him off in an hour's time. And while there were some nicely done scenes, when his stage setup crashed forwards and crashed down, that looked really good. And when he was using Logie Baird's assistant as a puppet, that was really, really effective. But I didn't feel a lot with... And I don't know whether it's the performance or just how the character's written. And the final vanquishing came off with that game of catch. It might have seemed more like an interesting idea than actually how it played out on screen. How did you feel about the character?
Yeah, I'm in a very similar situation to you, I think. So I really like the Toy Maker as a character. I think the Celestial Toy Maker is a pretty good story. It sort of drags me in episode 3, but as a kid I loved episode 4 so much. I think episode 2, if we found it, would be really cool. But this is an interesting character that has continued through Doctor Who's history. They've tried to bring him back several times. There was the aborted Nightmare Fair. Gary Russell's done a BBC book about him. I think Big Finish have recast him and had a number of different sort of stories with him. So there's always been this thing of, he's such an interesting idea that we want to bring him back, and finally he is. And the highs were really high. Let's be really, really clear about that. I agree that the stuff in the cold open was really, really well done. The stuff with Logie Baird's assistant and the Puppet Master, that was amazingly visually well done and a really creepy idea. And yes, the moment when they got into the sort of the hall of doors and they start to understand that reality doesn't work in his world quite as the same, or it doesn't work in his world, reality is different. And I thought, this is it, great, we're finally doing some games. The Toy Maker is now setting some quests, and it's going to be, this is really, really good. And I looked at the clock and I said, it's halfway through. It's taken half the episode to get to the Toy Maker games. Okay, well, that's fine. And then it sort of disappeared. His taunting of the Doctor with the death of sort of his companions, I thought that was really cleverly done and really good. And that, it didn't quite go anywhere, but it was a good moment. But Yes, I did get to the very end where they were playing catch, and I thought, okay, what's going to be the really clever? Oh, he dropped the ball.
Yeah.
Is that it? And I don't quite know what that was all about. Like, did he just drop the? Like, is that it? I mean, maybe there's meant to be some sort of literary irony that this great, powerful, immortal, elemental force was brought down because he didn't catch the ball, or maybe, but it didn't really sell me on that.
What are even the rules of this game? Can you just throw the ball 10 metres to the left of someone and when they don't catch it, you win? Or do you have to actually throw it to them? Or what is the rules?
Yeah, it was all a bit sort of... because I was sort of like, well, how does it work? Can the doctors just keep throwing it to each other? Can he take it in the TARDIS and then throw it? And I thought that was maybe something that they were going to do. There was going to be some sort of like time portal-y, or this is going to be, we're going to take the TARDIS to the middle of deep space, throw the ball, move the TARDIS and a billion light years somewhere else the ball arrive.
Yeah.
We were going to sort of get to that sort of thing, and yeah, so I wasn't quite sure. The dancing around to spice up your life was really well done, because there's a moment you go, this is maybe about to get a bit silly. Oh no, he's killed people. He's nasty. Okay, good. That's really good. I like the fact that he shot the Doctor. For 60 years we've had moments of, come on, villain, why don't you just shoot him? Mm-hmm. And this guy's like, no, I will. So that gave him some really good presence. So like many ticks along the way, but I don't think he was quite used in the way I expected, the way he could have been, and I did think the defeat was a little bit sort of like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm already starting to think, for this quotation mark 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, whether they shouldn't have brought the Toymaker back across all 3 episodes, and it becomes this mounting threat across 3 episodes, so that the finale is just a big climax to these previous 2 battles they've already had with this guy, and it's just a really, really big deal. I think that might have worked better as an anniversary concept, because you get people out there when you bring up this topic and say, is this really 60th anniversary fodder? You get, well, they don't have to be multi-Doctor stories, you can just hear the smugness coming off them as they say it. And I always reply, well, I don't need a multi-Doctor story, but I need something big and epic. And I think maybe having the Toymaker as the villain across the 3 stories and just increasing threat. You might even think you've got rid of him at the end of the first one. Then he's back again. That could have been a really interesting mini-series rather than just 3 wildly different stories to celebrate.
I get what you're saying, and I'm open to that. I'm not sure whether that would have compromised the first 2 in a way that may have been a bit unsatisfying. And to be really cynical, if we had really built him up so much over 3 hours, would him being defeated by a game of catch be even more lame?
Well, you wouldn't have the game of catch. Maybe that's how you defeat him at the end of the first episode.
Maybe.
And each time he comes back, it gets harder and harder. I don't know. Dave, you mentioned in that discussion the Doctors tossing the ball between one another. Do you want to go there?
Yeah, why not? It's probably the big point. We got the 15th Doctor about 40 minutes into the special.
Yeah, through bi-generation, and for some time, rumours of the Tenant Doctor splitting off from Ncuti have been out there. Indeed, this past week when RTD was quoted as saying, oh, look, I'm doing something crazy and new for Doctor Who, I actually threw it out there on social. If this doesn't point to the rumour, I don't know what does. And one of our listeners, Alex Macon, will attest to the fact that he asked me on X, okay, so what's the rumour? And I didn't want to put it out there publicly, so I DM'd him with it. And I hope you're not spoiled now, Alex, because what I told you was absolutely spot on. This rumour was out there, Dave, wholesale for some time.
Yeah, I hadn't heard it until midweek, when after RTD's comments, a lot of people seem to just go, oh, well, he's just confirmed the rumour, so we can now talk about the rumour. It's like, well, now that he's confirmed the rumour, it's literally a spoiler, guys, so why are you talking about it? But people
exactly.
just went, oh, no, everybody knows this now. Well, I didn't until somebody spoiled it for me, so...
Yeah.
And it wasn't one person, like, this was everywhere now. It was just like RTD sort of gave license to people just to, like, spoil the episode, which was a bit weird. It was an interesting concept. I think it certainly made things a bit different. I think getting to see the Doctors interact with each other was good. It gave Ncuti a nice, soft open. And I think the fact that we can kind of get that post-regenerative who am I, what am I doing, what's going on crap over with, like, in 15 minutes with David Tennant, and now I expect him to hit the ground running in his first proper episode. That's a good thing. I didn't need David Tennant forever. I'm not quite sure why David Tennant is this doctor that always comes back and he always finds another way to be there. I didn't need 15 minutes of him having dinner in the garden. I just didn't. I'm sure there are people out there that thought that scene was lovely and wonderful. I just didn't care. The big thing that I sort of did take away, though, is the Doctor or the show now has the Avengers problem, where once you've set up the Avengers, as people would probably know from the Marvel movies, you now have this thing where, if Spider-Man's facing an enemy, you now have to have some lines where you go, oh, and this is why Thor isn't here today, and this is why Iron Man isn't here today. The Avengers are busy today because they're not contracted for that movie. And I did sort of think, well, now anytime that the shooty Doctor is on Earth, things get a bit serious. It's going to be like, why don't you go get David Tennant's Doctor? Because he's just hanging around now. So I think that's going to be a bit of a problem. And the final thing I'll say, since I'm kind of just rolling with this, once that rumour was out there, I did see a lot of people not a lot, some people quite concerned about this idea of, it's changing mythology and everything. And I must admit, as it was happening, I thought, okay, so the David Tennant Doctor is around, but the Doctor's defined by who's the star of the TV show. And we know that David Tennant's leaving at the end of this episode and Ncuti Gatwa's taking over. So the fact that there is another Doctor out there is kind of irrelevant to me because they're not co-stars of the show. David Tennant is handing over to Ncuti Gatwa. Ncuti Gatwa is the Doctor. So whatever.
Yeah. Oh, and look, in a very... I mean, this is a show about time travel. When you're watching the David Tennant Doctor doing something, the Patrick Troughton Doctor is out there doing something else. He didn't stop existing. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And look, the example's always given that when Patrick Troughton's Doctor is facing the chameleons in the Faceless Ones, William Hartnell's Doctor is literally on the other side of London dealing with the war machines.
Yeah.
So yes, so there are always multiple Doctors out there. This has made it more overt. I guess RTD wanted some nice family scenes. I don't know. As I say, I wasn't particularly excited by it. I wasn't particularly stressed by it either. Like, it happened. We got some good byplay, no pun intended, and then Ncuti Gatwa took over, and Ncuti Gatwa's now the Doctor.
Yeah, and look, I've lived with this concept for some months now and gotten very used to it, to the point where I think I even said to Alex, our listener, if it does happen, I'm cool with it, and if it doesn't happen, I'm fine with it too. I'm really not bothered. And it does actually solve an issue I thought of at the time we saw that Tennant was back. And then it was like, oh, he's only coming back for 3 stories, Isn't that a shame? Isn't that wasteful? Even if they pad it out with some novels or some comic strips, having a Doctor, a whole incarnation for a few episodes seems so very wasteful. But now we have this brave new world where Tennant can come back anytime. We could even do a Tennant mini-series if we want. I understand your point about do we need more Tennant and all of that. All of that's really fun for Tennant fans, although I will say it does seem a little unfair on Ncuti that every other Doctor has always had a bit of clear air in this respect, but he's not going to be afforded that. There's always the chance Tennant might pop up somewhere or Tennant might get a special somewhere.
Yeah, that crossed my mind as well. I think that in my mind that was outweighed by the way that we got the post-regenerative nonsense that we always get kind of just dealt with quickly. And look, I get the feeling that Ncuti is not going to be a Doctor easily overshadowed.
Yeah. 2 quick comments on the bi-generation, Dave. Tennant got to do the "it feels different this time" line, which I thought was a nice nod to his father-in-law.
Yes.
In K's Vajasani. And the way they shared clothes, not only was it very funny, but it must mean that Dave was going commando in those scenes if Ncuti got the jocks.
You thought about that far more than I did. Fine, leave that there.
Well, I was looking and I thought, oh, look, Ncuti's got shoes on. Does that mean Tennant's got shoes on? And I was looking to see if Tennant had shoes on. And yes, he was barefoot. And I thought, oh, this is very clever. They've actually, bits of clothing have gone to both of them.
Wow.
I look for these things, Dave.
I noticed that one was barefoot and I just thought, oh, maybe that's because that was easier to play catch. I didn't even... Well done, Rob. You picked that. I didn't.
Yeah, that's what it was. Anyway, points from you, Dave.
Well, let's go with Mel.
Mm-hmm, yes.
Bonnie Langford was back. Bonnie Langford was great. I think, was she a bit underused? Maybe. I don't think she really got a proper hero moment, which I thought was a shame. I think Like I get that the guest companions are always going to be overshadowed by the Doctor and the actual companion, and that's fair enough. I just would have liked one proper hero moment from Mel. I think it was a shame she didn't get that. But look, Bonnie was back. Bonnie was great. She walked into the role really, really well. We got, the perfect one sentence explanation. I travelled with Sabalon Glitz for ages. He died. I came back, which in my mind suggests that Dragonfire was contemporaneous with the 21st century. I'm not sure if that quite works, or maybe the space Uber that she got had time travel facilities. I don't know. Who cares? Bonnie's back. It was nice to see her. She was good. Could have done more. That's my point.
I found it interesting when she sees the Tenant Doctor, because obviously she's working at Unit, and I guess there's been a buzz around the building. Oh, the Doctor's coming, the Doctor's coming. So she knows this is the Doctor, but I'm surprised there wasn't a line like, oh, look at you. Like, just to acknowledge that this was a different Doctor, just to acknowledge she hadn't seen this Doctor before. Something along those lines. It just felt like, oh, here he is, big hugs, we're off and racing. It just felt like it needed a line, maybe. Yeah,
look, I get the fact that probably since she started working for Unit, and particularly going to the ex-companions, therapy group, whatever it was, that they would have sort of had that understanding. I was kind of waiting for a line about I've seen this before, I've already had two Doctors, because she's one of those rare companions who crosses over two Doctors. Yes. Properly does. And so I was waiting for Donna to go, oh, he's going to change, he's going to be different. And she's like, yeah, I've seen this before. I thought that was a missed opportunity.
We have a whole episode on companions who cross over Doctors.
We do.
There's a plug.
We do. We absolutely do. So, yeah, look, I thought it was good. Quick side question here, Rob.
Yes?
Did Liz Shaw have red hair?
Sort of strawberry blonde, so it's on its way to being red.
Okay, so do we can still count Mel as the first redhead then?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was worried there was some Liz Shaw erasure there, but no, I'll take your, because you're far more into like fashion and hair than I am, Rob. So I will go with your view that strawberry blonde is not red.
Very good. I think it also depends on how those old images have been coloured. Sometimes the colours are a bit funny in old 70s images.
Yes, and I think she also had a wig for at least Ambassadors of Death. So
there you go.
Yeah. Some quick points, Rob, because we are getting towards sports desk time. Although, look, if we go a couple of minutes later, it's it's allowed. It's the 60th anniversary. The rules of time are bending themselves right now.
Yes.
Unit is back. Unit remains pointless, and Unit remains annoying in my view. Kate Lethbridge-Stewart is still phoning it in. We now have a big Unit towel, which is just so Marvel. It's kind of cringe. I'm not here for this big modern take on Unit. I don't think the new series gets Unit. I'm very worried about this idea of a Unit spin-off. Did you enjoy Unit, dislike Unit, didn't care?
I'm more on the didn't care in that respect, Dave. Although the line, oh, your father tried to keep this secret. No, they didn't. They went belting around the countryside in Land Rovers with Unit written on the side. It wasn't that secret.
No, that's very, very true. I thought that RTD's negativity about humanity came through a couple of times, and I've always thought that's a bit of a shame from somebody who's normally so jolly. He's just not optimistic about humanity, and that came through, and that was a shame. I have no idea what the salt thing was, and I think that was just an unnecessary excuse to get the toy maker back into the universe. I did like this idea, though, that he had his own realm and now he's escaped into reality, but the salt thing, that just made no sense to me, but whatever. And we did get a moment of the use of the word celestial, very, very explicitly said to be travelling around in space and cosmic, not sinister people from, a certain part of the world, which has always been, a fan controversy. So, interesting to see it referenced in there in that way.
Which never should have been a thing, because although the episode or the story is called The Celestial Toymaker overall, I think the only time they say The Celestial Toymaker, it's meant to be a lowercase c. Anyway, that's a whole other rabbit hole to go down.
Yes, and I think it's one of those things where, he became, or the character became something bigger than he was. And I suspect had we got the Nightmare Fair, he would have been the Celestial Toymaker with capitals, because fan legend just became what it was.
Yeah, but originally it wasn't that at all.
Yeah, no, get the point you're making, but yeah, look, I thought there was going to be some nod to that somewhere, and there was.
Yes. Words of the week, Dave.
Words of the week. Rob, you went with flat. Tell me why.
I did go with flat, Dave, because as the episode was ending, we're into the last, 5 minutes or whatever, the sense of being flat and even the word itself came into my head. And I thought, this is really bizarre. This wasn't a bad episode, or this hasn't been a bad episode. It was still going at the time. I've been entertained. I feel very comfortable with Shooty already. I'm really liking him. The whole bi-generation thing, I've had months to absorb, as I mentioned earlier. I'm completely fine with that. I get that Dave is sitting in an English garden having lunch. That's him healing, and he has a family, which is very nice. But if you had a scale of Smithy monologuing in the 50th that he's going home the long way round versus this as the end of the 60th, Smithy's monologue would be up like an 8 or a 9, and this would be like about a 3. I was like, okay, cool, we're done. What's next? And should that have been my reaction to the end of the 60th anniversary specials? So I was slightly flat.
Oh, okay. Interesting. And I will just quickly say I do like a lot of what I've seen of Shooty's Doctor, but if he's going to keep up this habit of dropping lots of "darl," "love," "sweetie," I can't stand that stuff.
Well, I think it might be part of the character.
We shall see. My word of the week was trilogic.
Yes.
Look, obviously partly a reference to the trilogic game. That was part of the Toymaker's first encounter with the Doctor. It's a reference to the fact I don't think we got anything quite as set-piecey and game-ish as the trilogic game. It was all about splitting cards and ball games, and I thought that was disappointing, but also because we have now got this trilogy of stories for this little mini season, and it was a perfect trilogy or trilogically of RTD. We have got now the RTD light, easy to access, entertaining opening. We've got the RTD darker, well-written, character-driven piece in the middle of the season, and we've got it's the end of the season, just throw everything out there and throw a few old references to the end, and oh my god, I hope this all works. It's really exciting. Marigold, do your bit. Like, we've got the RTD season ender in apotheosis as well. So this is the perfect trilogic approach to RTD's Doctor Who.
I like it. I like it very much, Dave. How about a score? What would you give it?
Look, I'm giving it a B+. I think it was more solid than the Star Beast. I didn't think it held together quite as well as Wild Blue Yonder. And Wild Blue Yonder, I think, remains the one of the three I'm most interested to go back to.
Oh, we're in so much similar territory. I'm giving this an 8. I was entertained by it. It had some good bits. It was perfectly fine Doctor Who. But it didn't grab me by the lapels and slap my face and shout, I'm a very important episode and you're going to love me. It was just good.
Hey, just good and an 8 isn't bad.
Yeah. Shall we go to the sports desk?
We really should.
Okay, here we are at the sports desk where we do play of the week, foul of the week, and MVP of the week. Dave, do you want to lead off with your play of the week?
I do. And now I've got to make a choice. I think I am going to go with the cold open. I thought the cold open was really, really strong. It was really sinister. It did grab my attention. It wasn't where I thought we were going to go. It was creepy. It was just a really good grab into the episode. So I had a couple of options, but I'm going to go with the cold open. What about you, Rob?
Dave, I'm going with exposition as a concept. There were a few times in this episode it was done really well, and I do want to highlight the puppet show you were talking about earlier with the Amy puppet, the Clara puppet, the Bill puppet, and the Toymaker repeating, oh, well, that's all right then.
Yes.
Every time the Doctor would make an excuse for how these characters ended up in such a bad way. That really cut through. It really sold the scene. And the exposition was a part of what was going on naturally in the story. And I thought, spot on. Great stuff.
Very true. Keep us going with your foul, Rob.
Dave, my foul is also exposition. There were a few times it was done really perfunctorily or really clunkily. like when Mel explains herself to Donna, or when Kate appears up on the top of Avengers Tower and is walking towards the Doctor and she's like, I fought them all, robots and yetis and clones, but how do we fight the human race? I thought, how is that a real line a real person would lead with?
Yes.
Rather than just a bit of exposition hiding as something you'd put in a trailer. That was so bad.
Yeah, look, that's fair. And I've locked in on my foul of the week as well. I almost went with the ball game, but we've talked about that. I'm going to go with the angry man wanting to beat up a car, because that was just... It wasn't a great bit of acting.
No.
And it wasn't a great bit of dialogue. It was another example of... Look, we'll talk about this a lot next week. I've got a lot to say about RTD and this stuff next week when we do our wrap-up. But when RTD weaves his message in, he's really, really good, as we've said. There are occasions, though, in this set of 3 episodes, and this was another example of just, I'm going to stop the story right now. I'm going to stop the fiction right now. I'm going to put the author's message down in really blunt terms, and now I've done that, we can go back to the story again. And that was an example of this. It's like, here is my message, boys and girls. And it's like, okay, that was subtle. Well done. And it wasn't even delivered by a good actor. Oh dear. So that was my foul of the week.
All right. How about your MVP?
Look, no shocks here. It's Neil Patrick Harris. He was just amazing. Maybe because I'm a big fan of his work and of him generally, that's sort of come through. I would have loved to give it to Bonnie, but I didn't think she got the moments to sell it. Shooty didn't get enough. Tennant was okay. I just thought Neil Patrick Harris did everything he had to do really, really well, and I'm just so excited and giddy that he was in Doctor Who.
I thought he was great too, but I'm going to come full circle on Tennant. I gave it to Tennant in the first of the specials. I'm giving it to him in the last of the specials. I think when I see Tennant on screen, especially this older, wiser Tennant playing a slightly different Doctor, I think, yeah, this is just the Doctor. It's so effortless for him. I just believe in the character. I don't see David Tennant playing a role. It's the Doctor, and I'm going to go with that.
That's really wonderful. And I gave him Player of the Week in our second episode.
You did.
So he's actually won it all 3 weeks from at least one of us. And given neither of us are particular fans of David Tennant's Doctor, that's a testament, I think, to how impressive he's been. And I've heard now in a number of reviews and a number of podcasts, other people who are like, look, he's not my favourite Doctor, but he's doing really, really well here. So, yeah, look, that's very respectable.
Yeah. Look, to summarise, very similar to you, Dave, this didn't intrigue as much as last week's episode, which is why I've got it sitting, 0.5 points below it. But they're around the same level for me, perfectly good, perfectly competent. If they were episodes 7 and 8 of a 10-part series, I'd be like, gosh, we're getting some good stories this season. But are they, and I ask this again in capital letters, a celebration of 60 years of Doctor Who? I don't think they are. You can say you liked them, and it was great to celebrate the anniversary with a good story that you liked, and that anniversary stories don't have to be multi-Doctor, as I mentioned earlier. I understand that mindset that some people have, and I understand why they say it, but did the 60th deserve something more, something that pushed the boat out and wasn't just 3 adventures for the Doctor and Donna?
I think you should play the Doctor Who sting there and throw up the words "to be continued," because I will answer that in detail next episode.
Alrighty, Dave. And just before we go, there is a next time trailer. Have you caught it?
I have.
It's going to be a big romp, I think, Dave. The Doctor is dancing in a nightclub. He picks up Ruby, and then they battle an airship full of space dobbies. You're going to love this one, Dave.
We have had typical RTD opener, dark mid-season story, and messy season finale. I think we are going to get RTD Christmas.
Yes.
And I'm ready for it. I'm steeling myself for it. I've got a couple of weeks to just get back to RTD Christmas specials. Right, all right. I'll get there.
You'll get there. You'll be fine. But until then, I've been Rob.
And I've been Dave.
See you next time on the Doctor Who show.
Goodbye.
Bye.